What is a true fact so baffling, it should be false? There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Raditha that was in the US market for a decade from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins. There is a 1 in roughly 5.2 to the 61st power chance that, if you were to slap a table, all of the molecules in your hand in the table would miss each other, and your hand would go through it. Story time. I learned this fact from a deep intellectual conversation with my engineering class 2 years ago, so there very well could be some kind of detail I'm missing here, but nonetheless, what I said is theoretically true. Giant squids have a donut-shaped brain, so their esophagus can run through the middle. If they try to swallow too large a bite of food, they can get brain damage. The youngest mother to give birth became pregnant at 4 years old. She's still alive and resides in Lima, Peru apparently. Lina Medina had a rare condition whereby her body went through puberty very early, making it possible for her to conceive a child. Her son was born via cesarean section when she was 5 years and 7 months old and was raised as her younger brother. The father was never fully confirmed, though suspicion fell on male family members. The girl herself obviously had no clear recollection. You can boil water in a paper cup over an open flame. I thought witchcraft was outlawed. If a gorilla looks grumpy, it's because they are relaxed and at ease. Greenland extends east of, west of, south of and north of Iceland. There are far more tigers in private collections in Texas than there are in the rest of the world, wild or otherwise. The USA is the third most populated nation on Earth. If you were able to add 1 billion people to the US population today, it would still be the third most populated nation on Earth. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sickness or feeling ill, under close control. There have been studies since 60s. There is a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake without protein, carbohydrate or fat intake, no food at all. Dropped from 207 kilograms to 88 kilograms and maintained it. After a follow-up checkup 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilograms, stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anybody is curious about the article, the PubMed ID is PMC 2,495,396. Keep in mind, for anyone tempted to imitate, multiple others attempted this after him and wound up dead. Do not try this at home. People were deliberately infected with malaria to cure their syphilis, and the man who developed this treatment, Julius Werner Jauregg, received the Nobel Prize for it. The extremely high fevers of the malaria infections killed the syphilis bacteria, then the patients were cured of the malaria using quinine. Quinine is the reason tonic water glows under black light. Giraffe seat bones. When I was in Africa, we were legit surrounded by a family of 12 giraffes. Then one bent over and picked up a gazelle carcass, looked dead into our eyes as it ate its leg. It was so fucking creepy. Ireland was a net exporter of food during the Great Potato Famine. More people died making the V2 rockets during WW2 than were killed by them. Another fun fact about V2 rockets. Germany was facing a large issue with rocket fuel shortages during the project because people kept drinking it. The fuel was made from 70% ethyl alcohol and 30% water, distilled from potatoes. It was the most economically viable fuel at the time, since they were already very low on other fuels. To stop workers from drinking it, they denatured the alcohol, essentially poisoning it, but people kept drinking it anyways, and getting extremely ill. This simply caused people to start leaving the V2 program, suggesting that they were only in it for the free alcohol. This also means that any alcohol over 70% ABV is stronger than actual WW2 rocket fuel. The life of Frane Selleck, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. January 1962, Frane is riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died, while he escapes with a broken arm and hypothermia. 1963, on his first plane trip he was sucked out of the plane's door and landed in a haystack. Unscathed, 19 other people were killed in the crash. 1966. He was riding in a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. 1970. His car's engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. 1973. In yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused with hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singing off all of his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. 1995. He was hit by a bus, but only sustained minor injuries. 1996. To escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve, he swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact to save himself. He jumped out of his car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say, the guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper. It says fail rate is over 80%. I personally know someone who in his carry-on accidentally packed a loaded handgun, made it on the plane, and was so freaked out when he landed, he upped it back home and took a Greyhound bus after his trip. I know a dumbass that flew internationally with a handgun in his checked luggage, on accident, but still a dumb asshole. He left out of Florida heading for South Korea with a layover in Japan. The Japanese found it, and he was arrested and spent over 2 weeks in jail. They let him go. The gravity of black holes is so great that it literally bends light around the black hole, so that if you could somehow stand close enough to a black hole and look straight ahead, you would actually see the back of your own head. The color orange is named after the fruit. Before, the color orange was called red. This is why people with orange hair are called redheads. Sharks evolved before trees did. Trees evolved before the bugs responsible for rotting, that is bacteria which could eat lignin and cellulose, did. Thus when they died, they just fell over in place and lay there instead of rotting. Over time, the weight of the upper layers of tree corpses compacted the lower levels, which eventually became the coal we dig up and use today. Mike the headless chicken lived without a head for 18 months. I live in the town next to where this took place. They now have a festival every year remembering Mike. A million seconds ago was week before last, July 24th. A billion seconds ago was 1988, 1987,